talk a little bit today. We're going to talk a little bit today about your path. I know that, come the new year, oftentimes people are in a place of reevaluating their life. What is good? Where am I? Am I in a place where I want to be? And if not, what is the place that I want to get to? And I think that the pandemic has also really heightened that sense for folks of, am I doing what I love? Am I doing something that charges me up, that fills my cup? And so I would love to hear a little bit about your path of how you decided to change careers and what maybe some of those decision points were for you.
Well, I started out as an RN back in 1980. And I very quickly realized when I became a floor nurse that that this was not what I wanted to do the rest of my life. I very quickly realized that I wanted more the role of a doctor rather than the role of a nurse. But I was a single mother of a 2-year-old. And so I needed to make a living. And 6 years into my RN career, I had an incident at the hospital where I suggested to a surgeon that he might want to feed the patient. And he looked at me like I was the scum of the earth and said, "What do you know about nutrition? You're just a nurse." And so I went and joined a room full of registered dietitians. I was the only RN in a room full of dietitians. And I got my master's in nutrition and always had a small nutrition practice on the side while I made a living as a nurse. And I started going to various conferences for nutritionists. And I became aware that there was such a thing as naturopathic medicine in these conferences. And so as time went on, I knew that ultimately I wanted to do something other than nursing. But again, I had to make a living. So a good 15 years before I actually started naturopathic medical school in 2004, I struggled with what I was going to do. And I know this sounds crazy, but it's not an exaggeration to say that about 30% of my waking mental energy on a day-to-day basis was spent going in this circle of thinking, okay, no, I'm gonna become a nurse practitioner. No, I'm gonna become a PhD in nutrition. I like nutrition. No, I'm gonna become a PhD in psychology. My bachelor's degree was in psychology. No, I'm going to go to law school because I also did some medical legal consulting and I enjoyed doing that as a nurse consultant. And I thought, oh, I'll do medical malpractice. And then I would come back around full circle and say, no, I've got to do naturopathic medicine. That's what I'm really interested in. And I seriously went through that circle. Well, like I said, for 15 years. Anyway, I finally one day realized it was time. I had to make a decision. My nest was empty. My son had gone off to college. I was single. I had the opportunity, and I reached a major milestone in my life in terms of age. And I realized it's time to do it or get off the pot, if you know what I mean. You've heard that term. And so I decided, you know what, I'm going to do it. And so I just filled out the application and was delighted to learn that they did not require me to redo any of my prerequisites because I had been a practicing nurse and a practicing nutritionist. And went out there, packed up my stuff from Plano, Texas, and moved out to Arizona and went to 4 years of medical school. And when I started, it had been 20 years since I had seen the inside of a chemistry textbook. and I dove into medical biochemistry. And if I can do it, you can do it. It was really a challenge. I mean, there's no doubt that medical school is a challenge, particularly naturopathic medical school. But I loved it. I loved every minute of it, and I would do it again.
Thank you. So what was let's say that 15-year time frame of kind of going back and circling around and, still coming back to this passion of yours. What was the scariest thing?
It moving, the scariest thing was going back to school. Can I do it? Do I really want to spend my time studying? Do I have to take all those prerequisites? Just taking the time out of my life, and how would I support myself? And I ended up a very serendipitous or fortuitous job came along that allowed me to work in the evenings and between classes. And so I was able to support myself. But then, as it turns out, student loans they give you, there's always a little extra for you to survive on. And being a nurse, I pulled shifts on the weekends. Not every weekend, but I would pull an occasional shift as an agency RN. And so it was doable, very doable.
Yeah, I think that oftentimes because we hear from students who are career changers all the time. And let's see, for those in the audience, show of hands, how many of you would consider yourself a career changer if you came to naturopathic medicine? I'm seeing lots of hands going up. Awesome. Well, you're in the right place. So, and another show of hands, how many of you are nervous about that endeavor? More hands. So
it's scary. It's a lot. It's scary, but the thing of it is, if it's something you genuinely have interest in, something you're genuinely passionate about, something you really want to do, you can do it. Just set your mind to it.
So, can you talk a little bit about, were you the only career changer in your class and in the students that you saw?
Absolutely not. SCNM at that time, I don't know if they still do or not, but at that time, they had 2 classes a year, a fall class and then a class that started in February. And I started in February. There was a guy in there that was my age or thereabouts, close to my age. In the class ahead of me that started in the fall, there was a woman in there. She and I are still friends. I'm 10 days older than she is. And there were a couple of other women in there that were career changers that had seen past their mid 40th birthday. And then in the class behind me that started the fall after I started, one of my good friends, she's 4 years younger. So there was a handful of people that were well past their mid 40s. And then there were lots of people throughout the 4 classes, 4-year classes that were chiropractors or were nurses or were therapists. There was a girl from South Africa that was an occupational therapist, and she was there. And interestingly, there were a couple of medical doctors. One of my favorite classmates, she was a psychiatrist, a board certified psychiatrist that did children's psychiatry, ADD, ADHD, that kind of thing. And she wanted to find a natural way to help these kids. So she came back and went through they only required the 2 years where she could learn all the homeopathy, botanical medicine, the naturopathic stuff. So there's a lot of people that are career changers.
Yeah. I know in the course of my education, I saw a very similar picture where it was really, and I hear from students oftentimes like, am I too old for this? Is 40, is 50, is 60 too old to go back to school? And you're never too old to learn. As long as you're open to learning, there is no age limit. And so, we really do see people across the spectrum of various different ages. It's not too late to start. And so, I think it's really just getting yourself to a place of, are you open to learn? Are you ready to learn? And are you ready to commit to a lifelong learning? Because so Dr. Ford and I were talking before we got on here, becoming an ND is, it's a commitment to always learning. So what are some of the things that you've learned since you graduated?
Oh, well, I go to conferences every year, and I'm always learning about herbs that maybe we didn't learn about in school. I have since gone through the certification process for IFM, the Institute of Functional Medicine. That was really a good review of the nutrition that we learn in medical school. That certification process was rigorous. And like I said, it was a good review. I go to conferences about, I've started doing a lot of genetic testing, and I go to conferences to learn about what the genes that are on these panels, what they learn, and how to mitigate the manifestation. What am I trying to say? The epigenetics of these genes. I go to conferences and learn about SIBO. SIBO was something that was never mentioned when I was in medical school, and I graduated in 2008. That's something that I've learned about. So I read NDNR, I read all these journals, and it's a constant refresher for a lot of stuff that we learn, because stuff, once you pass your boards, and if you're not using something every day, it starts dribbling out of your ears. And so, you forget. So reading journals, going to conferences, some of it's a refresher, some of it's brand new information. It's always a challenge. And I just decided to dig back into homeopathy. Homeopathy is not something that I've used a lot of. And I've decided, you know what? I'm always hearing characteristic symptoms when I'm talking to my clients. And so I want to really master homeopathy. I feel like I'm really good at nutrition. I'm really good at botanical medicine. I want to master homeopathy. And the thing about naturopathic medicine is that we are taught several different modalities, any of which can be a life learning career. Like there's acupuncturists out there, there's herbalists out there, there's homeopaths out there that never learn anything else. We get a good amount of information in all of those modalities. And so we have a lifetime to be able to really master that information.
Thank you so much. So, I know that we're starting to get some questions in here. But I did want to hear from you, as people wrestle with the various different, like, how do I move my family? How do I change my life over? All of those things. What are some of the aspects academically that you feel helped you? Because, the life stuff is going to vary from person to person as to their own personal situation of how they get organized to move or
Right.
to start the program. But from an academic component, sometimes I hear my more mature learners saying, oh, well, like you indicated, I hadn't looked inside a chemistry book in 20 years. Like, there's sometimes some self-doubt that you can handle the academic component. So what did you do to manage that piece of it?
I just did it. I can remember as if it were yesterday. about, well, it was during my first quarter. We had quarter sessions, 10-week quarter sessions. And I was sitting at my kitchen table with my anatomy textbook open. And I was preparing for a test for anatomy. And I had a moment where I just felt overwhelmed. I felt like, I don't know if I can do this. And then just as quickly, I said to myself, quitting is not an option. I had wanted to do this for so long. This was something I had set my heart on. Quitting was not an option. And so I just put my head down and I did what I needed to do. And I think that's what we have to do in life. You know, whether it's going back to school or whether it's having a baby or whether it's whatever you do in life, there comes a time when you feel overwhelmed and you feel like you want to quit, and you just have to put your head down and do what you need to do. I had resources. There were people that were good at chemistry that would help me understand. Khan Academy, KHAN Academy.com is a great resource to help you go in and understand specifics. You can go in and look up just about any kind of science question, and there'll be little videos that really help you. I use that extensively. One thing that was very helpful for me was that as an RN, I already had the big picture of anatomy and physiology. I mean, I kind of, you know, I'd been an RN for 24 years. I already understood that. And that was very helpful, but still there's a lot of information that gets thrown at you, but you can do it. If you want to do it, you can do it. You just have to put your head down and do it.
So there are a few people I'm seeing in the chat who have prior medical backgrounds, and I just did want to, and from your nursing background, you know, it's going to vary based on the
Right.
education that you've come in. So for people who are licensed practitioners who have either medical degrees or, like you said, psychiatry, psychology, and so on, each school will assess your education and where it meets in the curriculum on an individual basis. So
Right.
we can't give, you know, this would be your, you know, pathway. So I definitely encourage you to reach out to admissions counselors and at any and all of the schools, because, you know, like Dr. Ford said, the program she went to was on a quarter system. Some programs are on semester, some are on trimester. And so your coursework may vary from program to program. One of the programs does have a bridge degree program for medical doctors, and that's the Canadian College of Naturopathic Medicine in Toronto. And they have a 2-year bridge program for foreign trained medical doctors. So if you fall into that bucket, that is an established bridge program. But there are lots of different ways that this can look depending on, you know, your educational background, how long you've been practicing, and so on. And so I always tell folks, meet with the admissions counselors, talk to multiple of them from different programs to find out really what's the best fit for you. Education is an investment. And so, you know, how is this investment going to get you where you want to go? So Dr. Ford, there are a couple of questions that have come in that I'd like to just start with, and some of it you touched on a little bit, but one was, you know, in regard to your nutrition training, and do you feel that that was helpful for you in ND education?
Not the actual learning that I got at Incarnate Word. That master's program was more for registered dietitians to help them understand the pathophysiology of the various diseases that they were writing food plans for. What was helpful for me was all the conferences I went to through IAACN, International and American Association of Clinical Nutritionists. I was a member of that organization during the years prior to medical school. And all of the information that I gleaned there was very applicable to what I learned in naturopathic medical school. So yeah, that was helpful.
And what was, in that course of that 15 years of cycling back between multiple different degrees, what was it about the ND that stood out for you over maybe some of the other options you were looking into?
The thing about being a nurse that always bothered me was that the people that I saw in the hospital had chronic illness and nobody was really addressing the underlying cause of the chronic illness. And I felt like that was such a gap, and I wanted to really understand the underlying cause. With my nutrition, I knew that nutrition was such a huge piece, and I saw that that was a gaping wound in the conventional medical system. They didn't really pay much attention to nutrition. I just wanted to, two things. I wanted to understand how to get to the root cause. And number two, I had all kinds of books that I had purchased on botanical medicine and homeopathy and this and that, you can go to any bookstore and you can buy books on that. But I wanted to know what is true, what's the real deal. I wanted to learn from professionals. And so I wanted to learn from professionals, and I wanted a solid credential, because one thing that I see here in Texas does not regulate the acronym ND. And so there's maybe 40 of us here in Texas that actually went to medical school, but there are literally thousands out there that did a 6 to 12 month correspondence course and call themselves an ND. And I wanted a solid credential. I had built my career on solid credentials, and I wanted to know the real thing. So that's why that was my rationale.
And what did you do when you first got out? There was a question here about, did you go into private practice? How did you set yourself up?
I came back to Texas and got a job as a nurse and worked 3 days a week, 3 to 4 days a week as an RN. And the other 3 or 4 days a week that I was not working as an RN, I rented an office space and I started seeing clients. I put up a website and people started calling me and coming in. And I did that for 4 years. It took me 4 years to build my practice to the place where I could take off my nursing uniform. And that was in 2012, it's last time. But a lot of my colleagues go to work. I've had an opportunity to work for a doctor. I could go and work within a doctor's office or a chiropractor. I've had lots of opportunities, but I wanted to be completely independent. And so I did it the hard way.
Can you talk a little bit about balancing family life and school?
Well, I was blessed to be at a place in life where I did not have that challenge. I was a single empty nester. So can't help you there. I didn't have that challenge. Now, I will say my son had 2 children while I was in medical school. And of course, I would go visit them on breaks, but on a day-to-day basis, that was not a challenge for me. So I can't be of much help there.
We did have a webinar actually last year that we hosted with students and current students and recent grads who had families. So I'll find the link for that and post that in a little bit because it is a question, like how do I juggle? And
oh, sure.
I was always taken by my classmates who had small families and how they managed to time manage. And I will say they were the most spot on time managers you ever saw. There was no room for any, fudging. And so I think that it is done and it can be done. And I'll find the link for that in a little bit when I'm not talking, because I
Oh,
can't
yeah.
walk and chew gum.
Well, it's similar to managing a family when you have a job. I mean, if you think of it as having a job, because I went to class 9 to 5 or whatever it was, and then I would come home and I tried to do most of my studying during the day so that I could relax in the evening. But oftentimes I needed to study in the evening too. So it's just like having a job. How do you balance family and life work when you have a job or a career?
Yeah, perfect point. I think it's definitely well taken. So there are a bunch of questions that are coming in here. I'm going to try and do my best
Okay.
to manage them. So, did you enter into a full-time or a part-time program when you started?
Full time.
And have you found, did you ever look into studying abroad?
Studying abroad?
Mhm.
No.
Okay. So I know, and to answer this person's question, Ciara, sometimes there are NDs who will, that they might want to study Ayurveda and they'll go to India, or
Oh,
they may learn, different healing methods from traditional healers. And so there are a lot of folks that do that. Some of the schools pre-pandemic would organize trips of
right,
students to either service organizations that would take naturopathic students to Mexico or to the Caribbean for
right,
care. There
right.
are a lot of opportunities prior to pandemic, and I'm sure they will restart once travel is safe. And more accessible, and not such an up in the air type thing. I'm sure those will
Yeah,
restart again.
yeah,
There were programs I knew of that, some of the ND like dual degree acupuncture and naturopathic programs may take students to China. And so, all of that I'm positive will resume at
right,
some point, just not right now.
right.
So, what would you say, kind of switching gears to you as a practitioner, are there any pearls that you would like to leave these future students with? Anything that you wish you knew, that you wish somebody told you before you started?
I wish I had have learned how to organize my process. We had a business class that taught us how to write a business proposal and taught us how to do an elevator speech and how to maybe do some marketing, that kind of thing. And that's good to know because you've got to get yourself out there. But I had to invent the wheel and learn by error. You know, we all learn by mistakes. What kind of intake form did I want to create? And I ended up just making a Word document that's a template, and I use that today. I don't use an EMR. In the state of Texas, I can't be seen as practicing medicine anyway. I'm a consultant. I'm a wellness consultant. So I have a Word template that I use as my intake form and follow-up form. So those kinds of things, how to set up my processes so that it works for me and it flows. The other mistake I made early on is trying to address everything at once with people. I've learned to address things in phases. Typically, if I can get someone's gut healthy, then a lot of the other things that they are complaining about fall away. But early on, I would address their gut health, and I would address their anxiety, and I would address their adrenals, and I would address their hormones, and I would do, and they would end up with 15 different supplements that they needed to take. So I would overwhelm people. Um, You can't overwhelm people. So the process, I wish they taught more about the process.
Well, and implementing lifestyle changes is a process, and getting people to, walk through that path of making those lifelong changes that I think, when I hear from folks that are in the established medical system, that's one of the biggest frustrations. It's like you indicated with, nutrition in hospital medicine. It doesn't really happen
Right.
all that much. And so when it isn't incorporated into the dominant medical system in the way that it really would be meaningful for issuing lasting change, it is a struggle for some folks. So there was a question here about really trying to get into that piece of things of making a change in people's lives. What do you see as a barrier to that?
What is a barrier to making a change in people's lives?
Yeah. Like what are those mental blocks that people put it in their brain that tell them they can't?
People that are, my favorite client is the one that's sick and tired of being sick and tired, because when they're sick and tired, they're ready to do anything. People that are just kind of, oh, well, let me try this because I don't feel good, or, if they're not really motivated to make the changes, then they're not going to make the changes. Also, people that are invested in their illness. And I know that sounds, I don't mean to sound judgmental, but there are some people that it's just been my experience. I'm not a psychoanalyst, but it seems that they don't want to do the work, and they always have a reason or an excuse why this method won't work for them, or why they can't do this, or why they can't do that. So people that are really invested are the ones that are willing to make the change. Again,
There was a
sick and
question that
tired.
when I used to practice, there was a question I would ask patients who fit that model where, you're making recommendations and there are things that they want, they obviously are coming to you and they want to make some change. But I would ask this question very pointedly. And sometimes you have to have a stronger conversation with your patients. And it would be somewhere along the lines of, so how is this illness serving you?
Yeah, I've asked that question.
How,
Yes.
how is this how is, fill in the blank, whatever the illness is, how is it serving you? What is actually good about having,
Right.
diabetes, hypertension,
Right.
chronic pain, whatever it is? What is good? And it was amazing the types of answers I would get back. Well, it's
Yeah.
the only time my husband pays attention to me, or it's, like it would be amazing what types of answers would come back. And then,
Yeah.
and then the light bulbs would come on for folks and be like, oh, that's not a reason to stay sick. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Yes.
so it's really fascinating as you start to dive into the psychology of getting well. But I think I also, flip that of, people who want to become an ND, and sometimes they put up these mental barriers of, well, I can't do it. Or it's going to be too hard to move, or it's going to be too hard to this. And, and you put up some of those barriers, and it isn't until you're ready to take those barriers down that you can make it happen.
Well, one thing that was an issue for me is I did not want to wake up on my 80th birthday one of these days far down the road and say, I could have done it and I didn't. I didn't want to be disappointed in myself because I didn't fulfill a dream. And if any of you are familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualization is the highest. And I feel like I have self-actualized. I'm continue to learn all the time, and I'm eager to continue learning all the time, but I have fulfilled a dream. And there's power in that. And I'm not talking power over other people. I'm talking self-satisfaction, self-power in knowing that you did the work to fulfill a dream.
That's wonderful. So I am seeing a lot of questions, personal questions like, how do I get started? Or how do I, go from the path that I'm in to another path? So for those of you who are asking those types of questions, definitely please see the links that I've posted about admissions counselors and links to the schools, because those are really the best people who are going to be able to sit down with you and come up with the best plan for you, which 20 more minutes of a webinar is probably not going to take care of that for you. So I just want to make sure that people get their questions answered. So if you do have very specific questions about admissions, prerequisites, the course of study and all of that, that would be best placed in with the admissions counselors or financial aid counselors and so on at the programs. There was a question though about, can you work during school? And I know you touched on working a little bit. I worked a little bit, and then I found that I couldn't work. And so, I think that the question of can you work during school is very, very individual. I had classmates of mine. I had one classmate who was a flight attendant, and she would work. She would work flights on the weekends. And she had enough seniority that she could pick her flights and so on, but she would work flights on the weekends and bring her books and be in the, in the back of the jump seat, studying her stuff. And she was able to do that. I had RNs and massage therapists, and one of my classmates was an accountant, and, people were able to do some things. Some folks worked within the health community, but it's really very individual. And it honestly, it boils down to how much study time do you need? How quickly do you retain information, mass quantities of information, all coming at you in different ways? And so, that is a very personal question, is if you can work concurrently with the program, because it is a full-time medical program. The rigor of the program is really solid. And so any other things outside of that is very individual, depending on your situation, your study habits, your memory retention, and all of that.
I definitely would not go out there planning on needing to work. I would say, go and get in, dive in and see how it goes. And if you find that you have some time for work, then great, do a little work. But I certainly wouldn't plan on needing to work enough to support a family. I mean, there's only so many hours in a day, and you've got to get your rest in order to be able to do this.
Absolutely. What do you see the need for with naturopathic doctors now? Where is it? Why is this medicine a path that you chose? Why is this something that you see that there's a need for?
Well, every single week I get new clients that come into me that have been to 5 or 10 different doctors on 15 different medications, and they're still not feeling good. Nothing has changed. They're progressively getting worse. There is a need for what we do to complement what conventional medicine does. Conventional medicine in this country is absolutely unparalleled at that which it does best, which is crisis management. Crisis management. If you have an overwhelming cardiac emergency, if you get run over by a Mack truck, if you have an overwhelming infection, for God's sake, go see an allopath. Don't come see me. But after you have been put back together and the crisis is over, then come see me and let me help you restore your health. Let me balance your gut. Let me calm your immune system. Let me look at your genetics and see what your methylation profile looks like. So there's a place for both. We need both. And what I would like to see for this country would be for naturopaths to be the basic frontline family practitioners to keep people healthy. And then if you need a cardiologist, if you need a gastroenterologist or a hospitalization or something like that, fine, go do that. Do I think that's going to happen? No. I've been in the medical system too long, and I know how it works. I know what the financial motivations are. So I don't think that's going to happen in my lifetime anyway. But I think that would be the ideal.
So there are a lot of questions coming in. I'm trying to handle them. And I know we only have Dr. Ford for a few more minutes. So are there any last things that you would like to leave folks who are considering another career with? And I will stay on for a little bit afterwards and answer some of these other questions that have come in. So you don't have to stay on.
Well, I'm good. I can stay on for another 10 minutes, 12 minutes or so.
Good.
I think it would be important to talk to some naturopaths that are in practice, find out what they do, really take a look at what naturopathic medicine is. Look at where you want to live and is it a licensed state? And if not, are you happy and willing to do it like I do? I don't write prescriptions. I can't be seen as practicing medicine without a license. But in the state of Texas, I can certainly interpret labs and make lifestyle recommendations, and I get people healthy. I don't need to use prescriptions to get people healthy. But my point is, I would really look into it and know that this is what you want to do, because if you want to do it, then go for it. You can do it.
Very, very wise words. How did your nursing background help prepare you for your education and current practice?
Well, I mean, like I said earlier, I had already had the big picture, the physiology. I already understood hypertension and cardiomyopathy. And, I already knew all of that kind of thing. I was an ICU nurse, so I had an extensive background in all of that. What it does for me now in practice is when my clients come in and they tell me, oh, I've had this and that, I know where they've been. I know how their doctors are thinking. I know what their procedures that they've already been through are. I can anticipate what procedure they may be put through if I refer them to a cardiologist or a gastroenterologist. So being entrenched in the conventional world for 32 years, for 24 years when I started medical school, I understand both worlds. And so that's very beneficial for me. As opposed to some of my colleagues will call me and say, what's this? And why would they do something like that? And I'm happy to answer the questions.
So there are a few questions that have come in on insurance and practice. And so I'm going to stay on and after Dr. Ford leaves and just answer some of those more technical questions. About, sponsoring training and financing the degree and so on. Can you talk a little bit about your current practice? How many patients you see a week? How you've organized that now?
I see patients, clients in the state of Texas, clients 3 days a week. The most I want to see in any given week is 12. Because my intakes are 2 hours and my follow-ups are an hour. I do a lot of teaching. I always explain to people what it is I'm wanting to test and why. And when I put them on particular regimens, whether it's homeopathy or botanical medicine or hydrotherapy or anything like that, I do a lot of teaching. So my Mondays are when I look at my week and I pull labs and get out my charts and fill in my follow-up templates for that particular client. And I've got my charts ready to go. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I see people. And then Friday, I finish my documentation and updating my recommendations based on what we talked about. Oftentimes, I find myself doing that on Saturday as well. But 12 people, and I know that doesn't sound like much, but when you are really listening to someone and putting your energy into explaining things to people, for me, that's a lot. I have colleagues that can see 30 people in a week, power to them. But I try to give my ear to everybody, and that takes a lot out of me. So I'm comfortable with that routine.
And I've seen naturopathic doctors have various different types of practice models. And so one of the things that we like to do here at AANMC is share all of the different ways that NDs set up working environments. There are folks who have, like you said, 30 to 50 to 60 patients a week, and they've got very, very busy practices that look very different from somebody who's got 12 patients to 15 patients a week. And maybe that person is teaching or writing or doing other things that fill their cup that they enjoy. We have folks that have very different, very varied types of ways that they set up their practice life and their career life. And I think that versatility, that flexibility is something that I often hear from graduates that they enjoy, that they like that ability to change, sometimes even through the course of their career, where I've heard from people when their children are small that they have a practice set up a certain way. And as they get, as the kids get older and they're more school age, they set it up another way. And then as they're out of the house, they set it up another way. And so, I think having that flexibility to change without having to change your actual career designation is also a real plus for many folks.
I worked briefly for a company that came to town that wanted to do integrative medicine. So they had an MD and then they had me. And the MD would see them first and order a bunch of tests. And then I would get the test results and I would see the client, or I would see the patient and, go over the test results and make my recommendations. And they were sending me easily 10 or 12 people a day. And I found that I could not give these people what they came for if I was seeing 10 or 12 a day, because they came to be heard. They came to really understand what the test results meant. So in my 12 people a week, I give people what they're looking for and I charge for it. I'm not inexpensive. But I feel like it's an investment in their health. I tell them you're making an investment in your health. And so I give people what they're looking for. And that's time and an ear. They want to be heard. People want to be heard. Any of you can remember going into a conventional doctor's office and you're lucky if you get 15 minutes. And I'm not disparaging conventional medicine. I understand how it's set up and why it is the way it is. And conventional doctors are trained the way they are, and they do a good job. I'm not disparaging conventional doctors or conventional medicine. I'm just saying that's the way the system is set up. People come to me because they want my time as much as anything.
Thank you so much. I think people are hungry for what naturopathic doctors have to offer. They want, what I hear anyway, is that folks want to be listened to. They want somebody who is going to help unearth the root cause. So,
Exactly.
like you said, crisis management, absolutely. If something is in crisis mode, let's manage the crisis, let's get the crisis under control. And then, let's look at why things are showing up. Why are health crises showing up? What is the root cause? And that's what NDs really excel at. I
Right.
think that's our lane. That is our beautiful lane. That's the sweet spot where naturopathic medicine really shines, is
Yes.
helping to understand what is the root cause. Why are the chronic headaches showing up? Why is the chronic diarrhea or anxiety or whatever it is? Why is that showing up? Why do you have this? Why? When I taught at naturopathic school and I had students on my rotations, they used to call me, jokingly enough, Dr. Y, and not Dr. Y as in the letter, Dr. WHY, because I was
Yeah.
always pushing them to find out why. Why is disease showing up? And so I think that we really have a benefit to offer patients of understanding that why, getting to the root of the issue, helping to address it as naturally as possible when appropriate. And there's the therapeutic order of naturopathic medicine, which really addresses that and helps us guide care at the safest level possible. So oftentimes, like, there are lots of myths that I hear. Oh, NDs don't agree with, medicine, or conventional medicine, or this and that, and so on, and that couldn't be farther from the truth. It's
Absolutely.
that we look at the roots and the determinants of health: stress, sleep, nutrition, diet, exercise, healthy thoughts, all of those things as foundational. And then from there you go up the pyramid, and sometimes drugs and surgery are necessary and needed. And but have we looked at all of the other things first? And that's usually where a naturopathic doctor like Dr. Ford is going to really be helping people manage their health and stay well. And one of the things I love also about our medicine is that naturopathic doctors take the root term of doctor is docere, which means to teach, and we take that teaching
Yeah.
to heart. And so her 2-hour visits are focused on education, that you're educating people, you're helping them understand their body, understand how to stay healthy, understand your body's signals for when it's not off balance,
Yeah.
that many people are just taught to avoid.
Yeah.
So I love what you're doing. I think that you are an inspiration, and I'm going to stay on for a few more minutes to wrap up and answer some of these questions. But Dr. Ford, thank you so very much for joining us today. We're going
My
to
pleasure.
wave a farewell, but I will stay on behind the keyboard and just try and type some questions, answer some questions here. But thank you so very much for taking time. I really appreciate you. I appreciate you sharing your story and your path and your journey, and with our folks here today. So thank you so very much. And thank you all for coming. And I hope to see you again next month. We will have a webinar on cardiovascular health, and we have our virtual fair coming up on April 5th. So if you have continuing questions, we are the spot to come to. So thank you so very much. And I hope that you all have a lovely rest of your week and weekend.
Thank you.
Dr.
And
Ford.
thank you, everyone.